Hey, welcome back to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. I'm your host, Coach Zach. I am here with Coach Gracie and Coach JC. Glad I didn't screw that up. How are we doing today, ladies?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm phenomenal. What about you, JC?
I'm good. How are
Ready
you?
to crush this podcast?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, guys, we have done, I don't even know how many episodes about sleep, and we talk about it all the time in just about every episode. It's incredibly important, but we didn't want to because we've already said so much about this topic, we didn't want to do a super deep dive on, what sleep is and the different stages and cycles of sleep and all that. Instead, we wanted to give you some practical tools that you can use to improve your sleep, right? So, sleep is obviously incredibly important for just about every function in your life. And if you're not sleeping well, then you definitely feel it and it definitely affects you every single day. So we're going to dive in and just kind of go around here and hit some different things that you need to know about sleep and actual practical things that you can implement to improve your sleep. So Gracie, I will start with you. You're the only one that brought notes.
I came prepared.
You came prepared. What do you want people to know? Where do they start with this?
I'm going to say the biggest thing when it comes to sleep is to know that what you do while you're awake, so during your awake state, that's going to determine how well you sleep, how quickly you fall asleep, if you stay asleep. So your daily habits are going to have a huge impact on your night's rest. Basically, the biggest thing I would say we should know is getting sunlight first thing in the morning is so important for you and so important to set your circadian clock. So basically your body kind of runs on that 24-hour clock. And when you wake up in the morning and you get that sunlight, your body kind of says, okay, this is when I start my day. Now in the next, whatever it is, how long you're awake, say you're awake for 16, 18 hours, whatever that is for you. Your body is running, your body is moving. And then once that clock starts to wind down, then that's when you get tired and that's when that melatonin is going to start to produce. Also, kind of getting sunlight throughout the day is going to stop melatonin from being produced. So if you're someone who works in the dark and you kind of sit in a dark room, maybe, on your office computer or whatever, melatonin is going to be producing all day. And then at night, you're not going to feel tired. So if you're out in the light throughout the day, then your melatonin will start to be produced towards the end of the night, and that's going to help you sleep a lot better. Yeah,
it's early morning sun is more blue light, right? Healthy blue light, not the kind you get from a laptop. And like you said, that's incredibly important for setting your circadian rhythm and controlling your cortisol cycles so that you get energy at the right times and you're not getting energy late at night, right? Also seeing the sunset, right, is more red light, which will actually kind of trigger your circadian rhythm to say, hey, it's time to start winding down for sleep. So sunlight is incredibly important. The first thing you should do when you wake up in the morning is get out in the sun. And if you're like JC, who wakes up at 3:30 in the morning and it's winter time and it doesn't get bright till whatever 7, it's you still, when the sun comes up, you still want to get outside and get some natural sunlight in your eyes. And depending on where you live in the country, I mean, we're in a pretty sunny place, right? But depending on where you're at, the amount of time that you need to be in the sun varies a little bit, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so if you're viewing, say, the sunrise or sunset and you're outside, you really only need to view it for, 2 to 5 minutes, something short. But if you're viewing it from inside your window, you should kind of watch it for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, because you're not outside. Mm-hmm. So the direct light is not as
Exactly.
effective. Good point. All right, JC, what do you got? What practical sleep tips do you have for people?
Kind of just to piggyback off Gracie talked a lot about viewing sunlight early in the morning. Well, it's also important in the nighttime, she said, you need to be preparing yourself to sleep. So it's important that you're limiting screen time, staring in front of your TV or your phone screen or computer screen. That blue light that's coming from the screens is just going to inhibit that melatonin, which melatonin is the hormone that makes you sleepy. So if you're inhibiting production of melatonin, then it's going to take much longer for you to fall asleep. And when you fall asleep, like that quality of sleep will also suffer as well. So I would suggest limiting your screen time before you fall asleep, at least like an hour and a half ideally before you try and go to bed.
Yeah, and same kind of concept is overhead lighting is different than like a lamp that's on a table, right? So like you've got the blue light from your screen, you want to avoid that, an hour and a half before bed, but you also don't want like a ceiling fan light on. You want to dim that, and you want to turn a lamp on an hour before bed if you're like reading or something, and have that be your light as opposed to a ceiling fan or something like that. So what else, Gracie?
So if you are someone, I guess, who, struggles to fall asleep because like you struggle to calm down, likely your cortisol levels are really high. So a lot of us, like, say you like are in bed and then, your mind is racing, your mind is running, and you're like, I just cannot fall asleep. My mind won't shut off. That's because you're now like trying to slow down the mind, like using your mind, whereas you should be trying to like calm down your body, and so that once your body calms down, then that will let you sleep. So doing simple thing like breathing exercises or some meditation or something to calm down your whole body in order to let yourself fall asleep. And another one is caffeine. Caffeine is
caffeine?
No, don't take caffeine. Well, I mean, you can take it in the morning, but you shouldn't take it within like 8 to 10 hours of when you're gonna fall asleep. I feel like we all know that, but we just need that little reminder sometimes.
Half-life of caffeine is like I think it's like 12 hours actually. So when if you are drinking caffeine past like 12 p.m. in the afternoon, depending on what time you go to bed, like you might find it hard to fall asleep just because it's still in your system, right? And caffeine is a suppressant of adenosine, which is like your sleepy hormone. Adenosine is the thing that makes you sleepy. And so that kind of like when you wake up in the morning, that's starting, you have like, I'm kind of groggy, whatever. And then that's starting to like the adenosine's like suppressing in your system, and then you're awake, and then it starts to build up. And so that's the thing that's making you sleepy into the evening and triggering like, hey, it's time to get in bed because you're falling asleep on the couch, right? What else, JC?
Just making sure that like your room is like nice and cool.
Temperature.
Like me and Gracie were discussing about it earlier, your body temperature like needs to drop like 2 degrees like when preparing to go to sleep. So your environment needs to be like nice and cool. And anyone who's slept in a room that's like been super hot, that's really uncomfortable, and that's gonna just make it more difficult to get like a good night's sleep. So just make sure like you're preparing like your environment to be like nice and cool, your room is dark. And another thing to add to that, I would just say like when you are in bed, like make sure like that's your time to just like go to sleep and not like do homework or like do other things in bed. Like I have a bad habit of doing homework in bed, then going to bed like right after, and I feel like that just makes it a little bit more difficult. Like your bed should just be like for sleeping, and I feel like that will help you prepare for sleep much better.
I like to say the bed's for 2 things: sleeping and freaking. That's it, right? Yeah, don't do anything else in bed, because then you're triggering to your brain, like you're conditioning your brain to be like, hey, it's not just time to sleep when you get into bed. There's other things that we're used to doing. So the temperature thing, I'm glad you brought that up, because previously it was kind of thought that like 68 degrees, like room temperature, was ideal for sleeping. There's even some new research that shows colder than that is more effective. Like the colder the room temperature, the deeper your sleep is. As low as like 63 degrees. Now, obviously, it's going to vary a little bit based off of the person and what they can tolerate. But the cooler the room, typically, like the better rest you're going to get, right? I want to mention some supplements that are super effective for sleep for people. So, mostly everybody has heard of melatonin, like taking melatonin, which they have mixed results with. Melatonin usually can kind of help you fall asleep, but not effective for helping you stay asleep. And so for the person that like, hey, I don't have a problem falling asleep, but I wake up at 2 a.m. and they can't go back to sleep. Not super effective. And then also melatonin can negatively impact your hormones. Melatonin is actually what they give young kids to prevent them from going into like early puberty. So there are some like hormonal effects to taking melatonin. Even though your body produces it naturally, it's still not necessarily like the best thing to supplement with. So there are some better supplements that are, one, more effective, and two, really like no negative side effects. So number one is magnesium threonate, which people all the time are like, yeah, I take magnesium before bed. It doesn't really help me. I'm like, what type of magnesium, right? Because there are a bunch of different types. There's magnesium citrate and lactate and malate and, oronate and like all these different types of magnesium that all do different things in your body. Magnesium threonate is really the only one that will help you fall and stay asleep. So has to be the right type of magnesium. Apigenin is another sleep supplement, which apigenin is basically just like chamomile tea on steroids. So it's like chamomile extract. That's like the main chemical in there. Super effective for sleep. And then L-theanine, which is a chemical chemical that's typically put into energy drinks because it prevents like people from getting the jitters when they have a high concentrate of caffeine. So in energy drinks, it's like you're taking in a bunch of caffeine, but you're suppressing the like symptoms of that with L-theanine for sustained energy is kind of the idea. Well, L-theanine helps you relax, your body relax, your mind relax, and stay asleep. And so some people can do like a concoction of all three of those supplements and super effective for sleep. Some people only need one. And so my suggestion is always, like, hey, start with magnesium threonate, try that, see how that works. If it's like, good, but not, quite enough, then add in apigenin, then add in L-theanine if necessary. So those things are really like supplement wise, easiest thing you can do. If you're not sleeping well, then that's a super, like, we know people aren't always the best with their execution on getting early sunlight and changing their schedule and those types of things. That's a little hack that it's like, well, you can just take a pill, right? Or combination of pills. What else? Are there other things that you guys want to talk about?
Not really, but I just wanted to tell you a quick fact. L-theanine, yeah. That's actually found in turkey. So if you have like ground turkey or turkey or something before, like for your dinner, that'll actually help you sleep too.
Like on Thanksgiving when you have a big meal and you're like, then you just want to take a nap.
Yeah.
There's some other things that you can do if you're wanting to get a little bit more advanced. Routine is incredibly important, right? So waking up at the same time, going to bed at the same time. Also, when you eating your meals at the same time, like all of those things can help regulate your cortisol cycle, your circadian rhythm, and keep your body on track so that you're not throwing your your sleep cycle off. And digestion is actually really closely tied to our wake sleep cycles and our circadian rhythm. So that's why a lot of times people get really bad jet lag if they're flying to a different place, because or a different country with a different, totally different time zone, right? They go and they're starting to get the sunlight exposure, but sunlight isn't even as effective as digestion. So they start trying to shift. Now they're on a different schedule. They're now eating at totally different times, usually the opposite times of what they were if they have flown across the country, and it totally messes up their circadian rhythm. And so then it takes them longer to get back like on track, even if they're landing in a new country and now they're seeing the sun. So that's a little hack. Also, just kind of a side note or something that I think is important. First thing you mentioned, Gracie, is getting like morning sun. Like get sunlight in your eyes when you first wake up. If you don't do that, your circadian rhythm starts to drift. And so as it starts to drift by a couple of hours, you're now pushing back the time that your cortisol is starting to increase and give you energy, and which means that you're starting to push back the time that you would go to bed. And so this is why people will get into these cycles where they start going to bed later and later, and then wanting to wake up later and later and have a hard time getting out of bed, right? You can just think of that like as a natural cycle for like winter time, seasonal, right? Like the sun comes up later, and so it's harder to get out of bed at an earlier hour when you normally were getting up during the summer months, right? And so it all has to do with your circadian rhythm and your light. So if you are trying to maintain that same consistent schedule, like make sure that things look similar as to when you wake up, see the light, eat your meals, all of that. So, all right. Those are some practical tips that you can use to improve your sleep. We'll be back next week with more great stuff. Thank you so much for listening to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. Do you have a question that you'd like for us to answer live on the podcast? If so, all you need to do is head over to the Apple Podcast app on your iPhone and do 3 simple things. First, leave us a rating and review telling me what you think of the podcast. In that review, ask anything you want related to health, fitness, or nutrition. And if you want a shout out, leave us your Instagram handle or name. That's all you have to do. Then listen to hear your questions answered live on the next Q&A episode.